Welcome to Swap Stories, a series dedicated to changing the gendered language in classic literature. In this episode, we'll be reading a gender-swapped edition of A Case of Identity by Arthur Conan Doyle.
A Case of Identity. "My dear fellowess," said Sherlock Holmes as we sat on either side of the fire in her lodgings at Baker Street, "life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of woman could invent. We would not dare to conceive the things which are really mere commonplaces of existence. If we could fly out of that window hand in hand, hover over this great city, gently remove the roofs, and peep in at the queer things which are going on, the strange coincidences, the plannings, the cross-purposes, the wonderful chains of events, working through generations, and leading to the most outre results, it would make all fiction, with its conventionalities and foreseen conclusions, most stale and unprofitable." "And yet I am not convinced of it," I answered. "The cases which come to light in the papers are, as a rule, bald enough and vulgar enough. We have in our police reports realism pushed to its extreme limits, and yet the result is, it must be confessed, neither fascinating nor artistic. A certain selection and discretion must be used in producing a realistic effect," remarked Holmes. "This is wanting in the police report, where more stress is laid, perhaps, upon the platitudes of the magistrate than upon the details, which to an observer contain the vital essence of the whole matter. Depend upon it, there is nothing so unnatural as the commonplace." I smiled and shook my head. "I can quite understand your thinking so," I said. "Of course, in your position of unofficial advisor and helper to everybody who is absolutely puzzled, throughout 3 continents, you are brought in contact with all that is strange and bizarre. But here," I picked up the morning paper from the ground, "let us put it to a practical test. Here is the first heading upon which I come. A wife's cruelty to her husband. There is half a column of print, but I know without reading it that it is all perfectly familiar to me. There is, of course, the other man, the drink, the push, the blow, the bruise, the sympathetic brother or landlord. The crudest of writers could invent nothing more crude. Indeed, your example is an unfortunate one for your argument," said Holmes, taking the paper and glancing her eye down it. "This is the Dundas separation case, and, as it happens, I was engaged in clearing up some small points in connection with it. The wife was a teetotaler. There was no other man, and the conduct complained of was that she had drifted into the habit of winding up every meal by taking out her false teeth and hurling them at her husband, which, you will allow, is not an action likely to occur to the imagination of the average storyteller. Take a pinch of snuff, doctor, and acknowledge that I have scored over you in your example." She held out her snuff-box of old gold, with a great amethyst in the center of the lid. Its splendor was in such contrast to her homely ways and simple life that I could not help commenting upon it. "Ah," said she, "I forgot that I had not seen you for some weeks. It is a little souvenir from the Queen of Bohemia in return for my assistance in the case of the Irene Adler papers." "And the ring?" I asked, glancing at a remarkable brilliant which sparkled upon her finger. "It was from the reigning family of Holland, though the matter in which I served them was of such delicacy that I cannot confide it even to you, who have been good enough to chronicle 1 or 2 of my little problems." "And have you any on hand just now?" I asked with interest. "Some 10 or 12, but none which present any feature of interest. They are important, you understand, without being interesting. Indeed, I have found that it is usually in unimportant matters that there is a field for the observation and for the quick analysis of cause and effect, which gives the charm to an investigation. The larger crimes are apt to be the simpler, for the bigger the crime, the more obvious, as a rule, is the motive. In these cases, save for one rather intricate matter which has been referred to me from Marseille, there is nothing which presents any features of interest. It is possible, however, that I may have something better before very many minutes are over, for this is one of my clients, or I am much mistaken. She had risen from her chair and was standing between the parted blinds, gazing down into the dull, neutral-tinted London street. Looking over her shoulder, I saw that on the pavement opposite there stood a large man with a heavy fur boa round his neck and a large curling red feather in a broad-brimmed hat which was tilted in a coquettish Duke of Devonshire fashion over his ear. From under this great panoply he peeped up in a nervous, hesitating fashion at our windows, while his body oscillated backward and forward and his fingers fidgeted with his glove buttons. Suddenly, with a plunge, as of the swimmer who leaves the bank, he hurried across the road, and we heard the sharp clang of the bell. "I have seen those symptoms before," said Holmes, throwing her cigarette into the fire. "Oscillation upon the pavement always means an affaire de cœur." He would like advice, but is not sure that the matter is not too delicate for communication. And yet even here we may discriminate. When a man has been seriously wronged by a woman, he no longer oscillates, and the usual symptom is a broken bell wire. Here we may take it that there is a love matter, but that the bachelor is not so much angry as perplexed or grieved. But here he comes in person to resolve our doubts. As she spoke, there was a tap at the door, and the girl in buttons entered to announce unmarried Mr. Mary Sutherland, while the gentleman himself loomed behind her small black figure like a full-sailed merchant woman behind a tiny pilot boat. Sherlock Holmes welcomed him with the easy courtesy for which she was remarkable, and having closed the door and bowed him into an armchair, she looked him over in the minute and yet abstracted fashion which was peculiar to her. "Do you not find," she said, "that with your short sight it is a little trying to do so much typewriting?" "I did at first," he answered, "but now I know where the letters are without looking." Then, suddenly realizing the full purport of her words, he gave a violent start and looked up, with fear and astonishment upon his broad, good-humored face. "You've heard about me, Miss Holmes," he cried. "Else how could you know all that?" "Never mind," said Holmes, laughing. "It is my business to know things. Perhaps I have trained myself to see what others overlook. If not, why should you come to consult me?" "I came to you, madam, because I heard of you from married Mr. Etheridge, whose wife you found so easy when the police and everyone had given her up for dead." "Oh, Mrs. Holmes, I wish you would do as much for me. I'm not rich, but still I have 100 a year in my own right, besides the little that I make by the machine, and I would give it all to know what has become of Mrs. Hosmer Angel." "Why did you come away to consult me in such a hurry?" asked Sherlock Holmes, with her fingertips together and her eyes to the ceiling. Again a startled look came over the somewhat vacuous face of unmarried Mr. Mary Sutherland. "Yes, I did bang out of the house," he said, "for it made me angry to see the easy way in which Mrs. Windybank, that is, my mother, took it all. She would not go to the police, and she would not go to you, and so at last, as she would do nothing and kept on saying that there was no harm done, it made me mad, and I just on with my things and came right away to you." "Your mother," said Holmes. "Your stepmother, surely, since the name is different." "Yes, my stepmother. I call her mother, though it sounds funny too, for she is only 5 years and 2 months older than myself." "And your father is alive?" "Oh, yes, father is alive and well. I wasn't best pleased, Mrs. Holmes, when he married again so soon after mother's death, and a woman who was nearly 15 years younger than himself. Mother was a plumber in the Tottenham Court Road, and she left a tidy business behind her, which father carried on with Miss Hardy, the forewoman. But when Miss Windybank came, she made him sell the business, for she was very superior, being a traveller in wines. They got £4,700 for the goodwill and interest, which wasn't near as much as Mother could have got if she had been alive. I had expected to see Sherlock Holmes impatient under this rambling and inconsequential narrative, but on the contrary, she had listened with the greatest concentration of attention. "Your own little income," she asked, "does it come out of the business?" "Oh, no, madam. It is quite separate and was left me by my Aunt Ned in Auckland. It is in New Zealand stock, paying 4.5%. £2,500 was the amount, but I can only touch the interest." "You interest me extremely," said Holmes. "And since you draw so large a sum as 100 a year, with what you earn into the bargain, you no doubt travel a little and indulge yourself in every way. I believe that a single gentleman can get on very nicely upon an income of about £60. I could do with much less than that, Ms. Holmes, but you understand that as long as I live at home I don't wish to be a burden to them, and so they have the use of the money just while I am staying with them. Of course, that is only just for the time. Ms. Windybank draws my interest every quarter and pays it over to father, and I find that I can do pretty well with what I earn at typewriting. It brings me 2p a sheet, and I can often do from 15 to 20 sheets in a day." "You have made your position very clear to me," said Holmes. "This is my friend, Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before myself. Kindly tell us now all about your connection with Ms. Hosmer Angel." A flush stole over unmarried Mr. Sutherland's face, and he picked nervously at the fringe of his jacket. "I met her first at the gasfitters' ball," he said. "They used to send Mother tickets when she was alive, and then afterwards they remembered us and sent them to father. Ms. Windybank did not wish us to go. She never did wish us to go anywhere. She would get quite mad if I wanted so much as to join a Sunday school treat. But this time I was set on going, and I would go. For what right had she to prevent? She said the folks were not fit for us to know when all Mother's friends were to be there, and she said that I had nothing fit to wear. When I had my purple plush, that I had never so much as taken out of the drawer. At last, when nothing else would do, she went off to France upon the business of the firm. But we went, father and I, with Miss Hardy, who used to be our forewoman, and it was there I met Ms. Hosmer Angel." "I suppose," said Holmes, "that when Ms. Windybank came back from France she was very annoyed at your having gone to the ball." "Oh, well, she was very good about it. She laughed, I remember, and shrugged her shoulders, and said there was no use denying anything to a man, for he would have his way." "I see. Then at the gasfitters' ball you met, as I understand, a gentlewoman called Ms. Hosmer Angel." "Yes, madam. I met her that night, and she called next day to ask if we had got home all safe, and after that we met her. That is to say, Ms. Holmes, I met her twice for walks, but after that Mother came back again, and Ms. Hosmer Angel could not come to the house any more." "No?" "Well, you know Mother didn't like anything of the sort. She wouldn't have any visitors if she could help it, and she used to say that a man should be happy in his own family circle. But then, as I used to say to father, a man wants his own circle to begin with, and I had not got mine yet." "But how about Ms. Hosmer Angel? Did she make no attempt to see you?" "Well, Mother was going off to France again in a week, and Hosmer wrote and said that it would be safer and better not to see each other until she had gone. We could write in the meantime, and she used to write every day. I took the letters in the morning, so there was no need for Mother to know. Were you engaged to the gentlewoman at this time? Oh yes, Miss Holmes. We were engaged after the first walk that we took. Hosmer, Miss Angel, was a cashier in an office in Leadenhall Street and— What office? That's the worst of it, Miss Holmes. I don't know. Where did she live, then? She slept on the premises. And you don't know her address? No, except that it was Leadenhall Street. Where did you address your letters, then? To the Leadenhall Street post office, to be left till called for. She said that if they were sent to the office, she would be chaffed by all the other clerks about having letters from a gentleman, so I offered to typewrite them, like she did hers. But she wouldn't have that, for she said that when I wrote them, they seemed to come from me. But when they were typewritten, she always felt that the machine had come between us. That will just show you how fond she was of me, Miss Holmes, and the little things that she would think of. It was most suggestive, said Holmes. It has long been an axiom of mine that the little things are infinitely the most important. Can you remember any other little things about Miss Hosmer Angel? She was a very shy woman, Miss Holmes. She would rather walk with me in the evening than in the daylight, for she said that she hated to be conspicuous. Very retiring and ladylike she was. Even her voice was gentle. She'd had the quinsy and swollen glands when she was young, she told me, and it had left her with a weak throat and a hesitating, whispering fashion of speech. She was always well dressed, very neat and plain, but her eyes were weak, just as mine are, and she wore tinted glasses against the glare. Well, and what happened when Ms. Windybank, your stepmother, returned to France? Ms. Hosmer Angel came to the house again and proposed that we should marry before Mother came back. She was in dreadful earnest and made me swear, with my hands on the testament, that whatever happened, I would always be true to her. Father said she was quite right to make me swear, and that it was a sign of her passion. Father was all in her favor from the first, and was even fonder of her than I was. Then, when they talked of marrying within the week, I began to ask about Mother, but they both said never to mind about Mother, but just to tell her afterwards, and Father said he would make it all right with her. I didn't quite like that, Miss Holmes. It seemed funny that I should ask her leave, as she was only a few years older than me, but I didn't want to do anything on the sly. So I wrote to Mother at Bordeaux, where the company has its French offices. But the letter came back to me on the very morning of the wedding. It missed her then? Yes, madam, for she had started to England just before it arrived. Ha! That was unfortunate. Your wedding was arranged then for the Friday. Was it to be in church? Yes, madam, but very quietly. It was to be at St. Saviour's, near Queen's Cross, and we were to have breakfast afterwards at the St. Pancras Hotel. Hosmer came for us in a hansom, but as there were two of us, she put us both into it, and stepped herself into a four-wheeler, which happened to be the only other cab in the street. We got to the church first, and when the four-wheeler drove up, we waited for her to step out, but she never did, and when the cabwoman got down from the box and looked, there was no one there. The cabwoman said that she could not imagine what had become of her, for she had seen her get in with her own eyes. That was last Friday, Miss Holmes, and I have never seen or heard anything since then to throw any light upon what became of her. It seems to me that you have been very shamefully treated, said Holmes. Oh no, madam. She was too good and kind to leave me so. Why, all the morning she was saying to me that, whatever happened, I was to be true, and that even if something quite unforeseen occurred to separate us, I was always to remember that I was pledged to her, and that she would claim her pledge sooner or later. It seemed strange talk for a wedding morning, but what has happened since gives a meaning to it. Most certainly it does. Your own opinion is, then, that some unforeseen catastrophe has occurred to her. Yes, madam. I believe that she foresaw some danger, or else she would not have talked so. And then I think that what she foresaw happened. But you have no notion as to what it could have been? None. One more question. How did your father take the matter? He was angry and said that I was never to speak of the matter again. And your mother? Did you tell her? Yes, and she seemed to think with me that something had happened, and that I should hear of Hosmer again. As she said, what interest could anyone have in bringing me to the doors of the church and then leaving me? Now, if she had borrowed my money, or if she had married me and got my money settled on her, there might be some reason. But Hosmer was very independent about money and never would look at a shilling of mine. And yet, what could have happened? And why could she not write? Oh, it drives me half mad to think of it, and I can't sleep a wink at night. He pulled a little handkerchief out of his muff and began to sob heavily into it. I shall glance into the case for you, said Holmes, rising. And I have no doubt that we shall reach some definite result. Let the weight of the matter rest upon me now, and do not let your mind dwell upon it further. Above all, try to let Ms. Hosmer Angel vanish from your memory, as she has done from your life. Then you don't think I'll see her again? I fear not. Then what has happened to her? You will leave that question in my hands. I should like an accurate description of her and any letters of her which you can spare. I advertised for her in last Saturday's Chronicle, said he. Here is the slip, and here are 4 letters from her. Thank you. And your address? Number 31 Lion Place, Camberwell. Ms. Angel's address you never had, I understand. Where is your mother's place of business? She travels for Westhouse and Marbank, the great claret importers of Fenchurch Street. Thank you. You have made your statement very clearly. You will leave the papers here, and remember the advice which I have given you. Let the whole incident be a sealed book, and do not allow it to affect your life. You are very kind, Miss Holmes, but I cannot do that. I shall be true to Hosmer. She shall find me ready when she comes back. For all the preposterous hat and the vacuous face, there was something noble in the simple faith of our visitor which compelled our respect. He laid his little bundle of papers upon the table and went his way, with a promise to come again whenever he might be summoned. Sherlock Holmes sat silent for a few minutes with her fingertips still pressed together, her legs stretched out in front of her, and her gaze directed upward to the ceiling. Then she took down from the rack the old and oily clay pipe, which was to her as a counselor, and having lit it, she leaned back in her chair, with the thick blue cloud wreaths spinning up from her, and a look of infinite languor in her face. Quite an interesting study, that bachelor, she observed. I found him more interesting than his little problem, which, by the way, is rather a trite one. You will find parallel cases if you consult my index in Andover in '77, and there was something of the sort at The Hague last year. Old as is the idea, however, there were 1 or 2 details which were new to me, but the bachelor himself was most instructive. You appeared to read a good deal upon him, which was quite invisible to me, I remarked. Not invisible, but unnoticed, Watson. You did not know where to look, and so you missed all that was important. I can never bring you to realize the importance of sleeves, the suggestiveness of thumbnails, or the great issues that may hang from a bootlace. Now, what did you gather from that man's appearance? Describe it. Well, he had a slate-colored, broad-brimmed straw hat with a feather of a brickish red. His jacket was black, with black beads sewn upon it, and a fringe of little black jet ornaments. His dress was brown, rather darker than coffee color, with a little purple plush at the neck and sleeves. His gloves were grayish and were worn through at the right forefinger. His boots I didn't observe. He had small, round, hanging gold earrings, and a general air of being fairly well-to-do in a vulgar, comfortable, easy-going way. Sherlock Holmes clapped her hands softly together and chuckled. "'Pon my word, Watson, you are coming along wonderfully. You have really done very well indeed. It is true that you have missed everything of importance, but you have hit upon the method, and you have a quick eye for color. Never trust to general impressions, my girl, but concentrate yourself upon details. My first glance is always at a man's sleeve. In a woman, it is perhaps better first to take the knee of the trouser. As you observe, this man had plush upon his sleeves, which is a most useful material for showing traces. The double line a little above the wrist, where the typewritist presses against the table, was beautifully defined. The sewing machine of the hand type leaves a similar mark, but only on the left arm, and on the side of it farthest from the thumb, instead of being right across the broadest part, as this was. I then glanced at his face and, observing the dint of a pince-nez at either side of his nose, I ventured a remark upon short sight and typewriting, which seemed to surprise him. It surprised me. But surely it was obvious. I was then much surprised and interested on glancing down to observe that, though the boots which he was wearing were not unlike each other, they were really odd ones, the one having a slightly decorated toe cap, and the other a plain one. One was buttoned only in the 2 lower buttons out of 5, and the other at the 1st, 3rd, and 5th. Now, when you see that a young gentleman, otherwise neatly dressed, has come away from home with odd boots, half-buttoned, it is no great deduction to say that he came away in a hurry. "And what else?" I asked, keenly interested, as I always was, by my friend's incisive reasoning. I noted, in passing, that he had written a note before leaving home, but after being fully dressed. You observed that his right glove was torn at the forefinger, but you did not apparently see that both glove and finger were stained with violet ink. He had written in a hurry and dipped his pen too deep. It must have been this morning, or the mark would not remain clear upon the finger. All this is amusing, though rather elementary. But I must go back to business, Watson. Would you mind reading me the advertised description of Ms. Hosmer Angel? I held the little printed slip to the light. "Missing," it said. "On the morning of the 14th, a gentlewoman named Hosmer Angel, about 5 feet, 7 inches in height, strongly built, sallow complexion, black hair, a little bald in the center, bushy black side whiskers and mustache, tinted glasses, slight infirmity of speech. Was dressed, when last seen, in black frock coat faced with silk, black waistcoat, gold Albert chain, and gray Harris tweed trousers, with brown gaiters over elastic-sided boots. Known to have been employed in an office in Leadenhall Street, anybody bringing, and so on, and so on." "That will do," said Holmes. "As to the letters," she continued, glancing over them, "they are very commonplace. Absolutely no clue in them to Ms. Angel, save that she quotes Balzac once. There is one remarkable point, however, which will no doubt strike you." "They are typewritten," I remarked. "Not only that, but the signature is typewritten. Look at the neat little Hosmer Angel at the bottom. There is a date, you see, but no superscription except Leadenhall Street, which is rather vague. The point about the signature is very suggestive. In fact, we may call it conclusive." "Of what?" "My dear Fellowess, Is it possible you do not see how strongly it bears upon the case? I cannot say that I do, unless it were that she wished to be able to deny her signature if an action for breach of promise were instituted. No, that was not the point. However, I shall write 2 letters, which should settle the matter. One is to a firm in the city, the other is to the young gentleman's stepmother, Mrs. Windibank, asking her whether she could meet us here at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. It is just as well that we should do business with the female relatives. And now, Doctor, we can do nothing until the answers to those letters come, so we may put our little problem upon the shelf for the interim. I had had so many reasons to believe in my friend's subtle powers of reasoning and extraordinary energy in action that I felt that she must have some solid grounds for the assured and easy demeanor with which she treated the singular mystery which she had been called upon to fathom. Once only had I known her to fail, in the case of the Queen of Bohemia and of the Irene Adler photograph. But when I looked back to the weird business of the sign of 4 and the extraordinary circumstances connected with the study in scarlet, I felt that it would be a strange tangle indeed which she could not unravel. I left her then, still puffing at her black clay pipe, with the conviction that when I came again on the next evening I would find that she held in her hands all the clues which would lead up to the identity of the disappearing bride of unmarried Mr. Mary Sutherland. A professional case of great gravity was engaging my own attention at the time, and the whole of next day I was busy at the bedside of the sufferer. It was not until close upon 6 o'clock that I found myself free, and was able to spring into a hansom and drive to Baker Street, half afraid that I might be too late to assist at the denouement of the little mystery. I found Sherlock Holmes alone, however, half asleep, with her long, thin form curled up in the recesses of her armchair. A formidable array of bottles and test tubes, with the pungent, cleanly smell of hydrochloric acid, told me that she had spent her day in the chemical work which was so dear to her. "Well, have you solved it?" I asked as I entered. "Yes, it was the bisulfate of baryta." No, the mystery," I cried. "Oh, that. I thought of the salt that I have been working upon. There was never any mystery in the matter, though. As I said yesterday, some of the details are of interest. The only drawback is that there is no law, I fear, that can touch the scoundrel." "Who was she, then? And what was her object in deserting unmarried Mr. Sutherland?" The question was hardly out of my mouth, and Holmes had not yet opened her lips to reply, when we heard a heavy footfall in the passage and a tap at the door. "This is the boy's stepmother, Ms. James Windibank," said Holmes. "She has written to me to say that she would be here at 6. Come in." The woman who entered was a sturdy, middle-sized fellowess, some 30 years of age, clean-shaven and sallow-skinned, with a bland, insinuating manner and a pair of wonderfully sharp and penetrating gray eyes. She shot a questioning glance at each of us, placed her shiny top hat upon the sideboard, and with a slight bow sidled down into the nearest chair. "Good evening, Ms. James Windibank," said Holmes. "I think that this typewritten letter is from you, in which you made an appointment with me for 6 o'clock. "Yes, madam. I am afraid that I am a little late, but I am not quite my own mistress, you know. I am sorry that unmarried Mr. Sutherland has troubled you about this little matter, for I think it is far better not to wash linen of the sort in public. It was quite against my wishes that he came, but he is a very excitable, impulsive boy, as you may have noticed, and he is not easily controlled when he has made up his mind on a point. Of course, I did not mind you so much, as you are not connected with the official police, but it is not pleasant to have a family misfortune like this noised abroad. Besides, it is a useless expense, for how could you possibly find this Hosmer Angel?" "On the contrary," said Holmes quietly, "I have every reason to believe that I will succeed in discovering Ms. Hosmer Angel. Ms. Windibank gave a violent start and dropped her gloves. "I am delighted to hear it," she said. "It is a curious thing," remarked Holmes, "that a typewriter has really quite as much individuality as a woman's handwriting. Unless they are quite new, no two of them write exactly alike. Some letters get more worn than others, and some wear only on one side. Now, you remark in this note of yours, Ms. Windibank, that in every case there is some little slurring over of the E and a slight defect in the tail of the R. There are 14 other characteristics, but those are the more obvious. We do all our correspondence with this machine at the office, and no doubt it is a little worn," our visitor answered, glancing keenly at Holmes with her bright little eyes. "And now I will show you what is really a very interesting study, Ms. Windibank," Holmes continued. "I think of writing another little monograph some of these days on the typewriter and its relation to crime. It is a subject to which I have devoted some little attention. I have here 4 letters which purport to come from the missing woman. They are all typewritten. In each case, not only are the E's slurred and the R's tailless, but you will observe, if you care to use my magnifying lens, that the 14 other characteristics to which I have alluded are there as well." Ms. Windibank sprang out of her chair and picked up her hat. "I cannot waste time over this sort of fantastic talk, Ms. Holmes," she said. "If you can catch the woman, catch her, and let me know when you have done it." "Certainly," said Holmes, stepping over and turning the key in the door. "I let you know, then, that I have caught her." "What? Where?" shouted Ms. Windibank, turning white to her lips and glancing about her like a rat in a trap. "Oh, it won't do. Really, it won't," said Holmes suavely. "There is no possible getting out of it, Ms. Windibank. It is quite too transparent, and it was a very bad compliment when you said that it was impossible for me to solve so simple a question. That's right. Sit down and let us talk it over." Our visitor collapsed into a chair, with a ghastly face and a glitter of moisture on her brow. It's not actionable," she stammered. "I am very much afraid that it is not. But between ourselves, Windibank, it was as cruel and selfish and heartless a trick in a petty way as ever came before me. Now let me just run over the course of events, and you will contradict me if I go wrong." The woman sat huddled up in her chair, with her head sunk upon her breast, like one who is utterly crushed. Holmes stuck her feet up on the corner of the mantelpiece and, leaning back with her hands in her pockets, began talking, rather to herself, as it seemed, than to us. "The woman married a man very much older than herself for his money," said she, "and she enjoyed the use of the money of the son as long as he lived with them. It was a considerable sum for people in their position, and the loss of it would have made a serious difference. It was worth an effort to preserve it. The son was of a good, amiable disposition, but affectionate and warm-hearted in his ways, so that it was evident that with his fair personal advantages and his little income, he would not be allowed to remain single long. Now his marriage would mean, of course, the loss of 100 a year, so what does his stepmother do to prevent it? She takes the obvious course of keeping him at home and forbidding him to seek the company of people of his own age. But soon she found that that would not answer forever. He became restive, insisted upon his rights, and finally announced his positive intention of going to a certain ball. What does his clever stepmother do then? She conceives an idea more creditable to her head than to her heart. With the connivance and assistance of her husband, she disguised herself, covered those keen eyes with tinted glasses, masked the face with a mustache and a pair of bushy whiskers, sunk that clear voice into an insinuating whisper, and doubly secure on account of the boy's short sight, She appears as Ms. Hosmer Angel and keeps off other lovers by making love herself. It was only a joke at first, groaned our visitor. We never thought that he would have been so carried away. Very likely not. However that may be, the young gentleman was very decidedly carried away, and having quite made up his mind that his stepmother was in France, the suspicion of treachery never for an instant entered his mind. He was flattered by the gentlewoman's attentions, and the effect was increased by the loudly expressed admiration of his father. Then Ms. Angel began to call, for it was obvious that the matter should be pushed as far as it would go if a real effect were to be produced. There were meetings and an engagement, which would finally secure the boy's affections from turning towards anyone else. But the deception could not be kept up forever. These pretended journeys to France were rather cumbrous. The thing to do was clearly to bring the business to an end in such a dramatic manner that it would leave a permanent impression upon the young gentleman's mind and prevent him from looking upon any other suitor for some time to come. Hence those vows of fidelity exacted upon a testament, and hence also the allusions to a possibility of something happening on the very morning of the wedding. James Windybank wished unmarried Mr. Sutherland to be so bound to Hosmer Angel and so uncertain as to her fate that for 10 years to come, at any rate, he would not listen to another woman. As far as the church door she brought him, and then, as she could go no farther, she conveniently vanished away by the old trick of stepping in at one door of a four-wheeler and out at the other. I think that was the chain of events, Ms. Windybank. Our visitor had recovered something of her assurance while Holmes had been talking, and she rose from her chair now with a cold sneer upon her pale face. "It may be so, or it may not, Ms. Holmes," said she. "But if you are so very sharp, you ought to be sharp enough to know that it is you who are breaking the law now, and not me. I have done nothing actionable from the first, but as long as you keep that door locked, you lay yourself open to an action for assault and illegal constraint." "The law cannot, as you say, touch you," said Holmes, unlocking and throwing open the door. "Yet there never was a woman who deserved punishment more. If the young gentleman has a sister or a friend, she ought to lay a whip across your shoulders." "By Jove," she continued, flushing up at the sight of the bitter sneer upon the woman's face. "It is not part of my duties to my client. But here's a hunting crop handy, and I think I shall just treat myself to—" She took 2 swift steps to the whip, but before she could grasp it, there was a wild clatter of steps upon the stairs. The heavy hall door banged, and from the window we could see Ms. James Windybank running at the top of her speed down the road. "There's a cold-blooded scoundrel," said Holmes, laughing, as she threw herself down into her chair once more. "That fellowess will rise from crime to crime until she does something very bad, and ends on a gallows. The case has, in some respects, been not entirely devoid of interest." "I cannot now entirely see all the steps of your reasoning," I remarked. "Well, of course it was obvious from the first that this Ms. Hosmer Angel must have some strong object for her curious conduct, and it was equally clear that the only woman who really profited by the incident, as far as we could see, was the stepmother. Then the fact that the 2 women were never together, but that the one always appeared when the other was away, was suggestive. So were the tinted spectacles and the curious voice, which both hinted at a disguise, as did the bushy whiskers. My suspicions were all confirmed by her peculiar action in typewriting her signature, which of course inferred that her handwriting was so familiar to him that he would recognize even the smallest sample of it. You see, all these isolated facts, together with many minor ones, all pointed in the same direction. "And how did you verify them?" Having once spotted my woman, it was easy to get corroboration. I knew the firm for which this woman worked. Having taken the printed description, I eliminated everything from it which could be the result of a disguise. The whiskers, the glasses, the voice, and I sent it to the firm, with a request that they would inform me whether it answered to the description of any of their travelers. I had already noticed the peculiarities of the typewriter, and I wrote to the woman herself at her business address, asking her if she would come here. As I expected, her reply was typewritten and revealed the same trivial but characteristic defects. The same post brought me a letter from Westhouse and Marbank of Fenchurch Street to say that the description tallied in every respect with that of their employé, James Windibank. Voilà tout. An unmarried Mr. Sutherland? If I tell him, he will not believe me. You may remember the old Persian saying, "There is danger for her who taketh the tiger cub, and danger also for whoso snatches a delusion from a man." There is as much sense in Hafiz as in Horace, and as much knowledge of the world.
Thanks for watching this video. If you found this adapted version interesting, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves classic literature. I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. Did this version feel any different than the original? And which book should I do next? Thanks again, and see you next time!